In the blistering summer of 479 BC, a vast Persian army stood ready to crush the last resistance of free Greece. They had returned after previous defeats, stronger, more determined, and with a clear mission: finish what Xerxes had begun. But across the plain of Plataea, a different force had risen. Not just an army of soldiers, but of citizens, of farmers, craftsmen, poets, and warriors, bound not by a single king or tyrant, but by a shared idea: freedom. And for that, they were willing to fight to the death. Just 1 year before, the Greeks had struck a stunning blow at Salamis, destroying the Persian fleet and forcing Xerxes to retreat to Asia. Yet not all Persian forces had withdrawn. Xerxes left behind a powerful land army under the command of his trusted general, Mardonius. His mission was clear: dominate the rest of Greece, coerce the independent cities into submission, and plant the Persian standard firmly in European soil. Mardonius knew that if he could break Athens, either militarily or politically, the rest would fall like dominoes. So he turned to diplomacy first. He offered the Athenians peace, protection, even generous rebuilding funds if they would simply abandon the alliance with Sparta. But Athens, though burned to the ground just months before, did not waver. They remembered Marathon. They remembered Salamis. They remembered the destruction of their temples and homes, and they chose to resist. In response, the Athenians called for help. Sparta, which had preferred to defend from behind the Isthmus of Corinth, realized that unity was now a necessity. Reluctantly at first, but decisively in the end, they joined the call for a final confrontation. Thus, a pan-Hellenic alliance began to take shape. From all across the Greek world, Sparta, Athens, Corinth, Megara, and many smaller polis, tens of thousands of hoplites gathered. At their head stood the Spartan regent Pausanias, a strict but capable leader. At his side was Aristides, the respected Athenian statesman, famous for his integrity. For perhaps the first time, bitter rivals marched under a single command, their differences set aside in the face of a greater threat. They chose the plains near Plataea for their stand. The city had remained loyal to Athens, and the terrain was ideal, broken and uneven, limiting the Persian cavalry's effectiveness. The Greek forces took to higher ground, near the foothills of Mount Cithaeron, where access to fresh water and natural defenses could strengthen their position. This was no place for rash moves. It was a position designed to draw the Persians in and destroy them. Mardonius, meanwhile, prepared his own force. His army was a mosaic of the Persian Empire itself: Medes, Bactrians, Indians, archers, cavalry, and Greek allies from Thebes and other cities who had betrayed the Pan-Hellenic cause. His plan was to provoke the Greeks into descending from their positions, where the Persian archers and cavalry could wreak havoc in the open. To force their hand, Mardonius launched harassment raids. His cavalry, led by the general Mezistes, targeted Greek supply lines and water sources. Arrows rained down on the hoplites, and panic began to stir in the ranks. But the Greeks held their ground, and in one daring skirmish, Mezistes was killed, a moment that sent shockwaves through the Persian camp and lifted the morale of the Greek troops. The myth of Persian invincibility was already beginning to crack. Inside the Greek camps, the cultural contrast between the soldiers was clear. The Spartans sat silently, polishing their shields, whispering prayers to Ares and their ancestors. Among them, a soldier's word was sacred, and the thought of retreat was more shameful than death. The Athenians, in contrast, sang songs of past victories, told stories of bravery at Marathon and Salamis, and stirred each other with memories of loved ones waiting on the island of Salamis. Despite different customs, both cities were now driven by the same resolve: to stop the invader once and for all. Meanwhile, Mardonius grew restless. His provisions were running low. Time was not on his side. He tried again to pressure the Greeks, challenging them to come down and fight on the plain. Still, the Greeks refused, and so he waited. But the wait would not last much longer. After several days of stalemate, the Greek commanders decided to reposition to a more secure location near Plataea itself. The move was supposed to be orderly, done in phases to avoid exposing the army. But things went wrong. Sparta hesitated, some say due to arguments over the shame of retreat, while other contingents like Athens and Corinth began to move too early. Gaps appeared in the line, confusion spread, and Persian scouts saw it all. Mardonius believed the Greeks were fleeing. His moment had come. At dawn, he ordered a full-scale assault, confident that he was about to crush a broken army in retreat. The Persian cavalry struck first, galloping forward and unleashing a torrent of arrows and javelin. Behind them surged the infantry, thousands of soldiers, banners waving, drums beating. The Greek army was caught mid-movement, and chaos erupted. But then, amidst the dust and shouting, came order. Spartan trumpets sounded. Hoplites slammed their spears against their shields in unison, forming tight, impenetrable phalanxes. On the eastern flank, the Athenians did the same. The chaos became cohesion. The phalanx, dense, disciplined, and nearly indestructible, was ready. Persian infantry clashed with the Greek lines, but they were no match. Their wicker shields shattered against bronze. Their short spears failed to pierce the Greek armor. Arrows bounced off shields, while long Greek spears reached deep into enemy ranks. The Persian numbers meant little when faced with walls of ironclad warriors moving as one. On the left flank, the Athenians faced not Persians, but fellow Greeks, Thebans, and other Boeotians who had sided with the invaders. It was a cruel twist, Greeks killing Greeks for opposing visions of freedom and empire. But the Athenians, led by Aristides, stood firm. Reinforcements from Plataea joined them, and soon the Theban lines began to crack. In the center, Mardonius still believed he could force a breakthrough. Clad in ornate armor, mounted on horseback, he rallied his troops with shouts and promises. But as the Spartan line pressed forward, even his presence could not hold the tide. Then, in a single moment that shattered Persian resolve, Mardonius was struck down. Whether by spear or stone, history does not agree. What mattered was this: the heart of the Persian force had stopped beating. With their commander dead, Persian units began to disintegrate. Some fled. Others resisted briefly only to be overwhelmed. Discipline collapsed. Officers argued. Morale vanished. The once mighty army that had marched across Asia collapsed into a retreating horde. They fled to their fortified camp, thinking wooden palisades would protect them. But the Greeks pursued with fury. Hoplites stormed the walls. Arrows flew. Swords clashed. Screams echoed across the plain. Persian opulence, tents of silk, chariots, golden cups, was trampled underfoot as the defenders were slaughtered. The contrast between the disciplined, battle-hardened Greeks and the luxurious, overextended Persians could not have been starker. Inside the Persian camp, chaos turned to massacre. The Greeks looted vast treasures, but their commanders, especially Pausanias, tried to restore order. He reportedly walked through Mardonius's tent, marveling at its wealth, and reminded his soldiers that the battle was won not for gold, but for Greece. By the end of the day, the Persian invasion force lay in ruins. Survivors fled in all directions, hunted or scattered, never to regroup. The dream of Persian domination over mainland Greece had died at Plataea. This was more than a military victory. It was a turning point in world history. Sparta's image as a land-based superpower was cemented. Athens, with its city in ruins but its will unbroken, would soon rise to lead the Delian League and build a maritime empire. The Persian Empire, though still vast, would never again threaten the Greek mainland. And cities like Thebes, who had chosen the wrong side, would suffer lasting consequences. In the years to come, the Greeks would bury their dead at Plataea with full honors. Monuments were raised, songs were sung, and for generations, the names of those who stood that day were remembered with pride. Together with Marathon and Salamis, Plataea became one of the pillars of Hellenic identity, a moment when free men chose to stand together and push back against overwhelming odds. A day when courage, unity, and discipline defeated arrogance and empire. And so, in the dust of that ancient battlefield, Greece didn't just win a war, preserved a civilization. The day Greece defeated an empire was the day Western freedom survived.